Hello everyone. I decided to brave the back pain a little bit more to do another video. This video is not actually a specific rebuttal to my documentary. I guess he's responding to something else, but there's so many bad arguments made in this video that I felt compelled to answer some of them with my own. I initially did this in the comments mostly, and it looks like he's leaving my comments there, which are all timestamped to reply to things, but he also eventually bans me and says I was misbehaving on his channel. I was completely civil with him through it. There were a few times I did put some LOLs on there because, I mean, I hate to say it, he said some pretty ridiculous stuff. Um, so, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and play his video and then make some replies. I may refer to the comments that I made earlier because I was able to be a bit more concise in text, and we'll take it from here.
Hi, my name is Paul Katz. I already shot a video regarding the Kyle Rittenhouse case, and I kind of did an overview, a 3-minute overview of why his actions were recklessly criminal, in my opinion, and why that's probably the basis for first charge, reckless homicide. But I didn't really go too much into one of the underlying laws that I think really inform us of this. So in this case, for this video, I have my screen share on. I'm actually going to go through some of the statutes of Wisconsin, some of the laws, and why Kyle's involvement that night, frankly, was a felony. Really, just from the moment he stepped on public space with a weapon, patrolling for trouble.
That's not a felony at all. You could make the argument that he committed a misdemeanor by being a 17-year-old carrying a rifle.
And why really any resulting death would automatically classify it as a reckless homicide. So I'm going to look the other way every so often to pull up references from another monitor. So first, there's this reference from the Wisconsin Constitution, which is important to know. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this in. And this is pretty straightforward. I think it's number 20, military subordination of power. And just pretty straightforward. The military shall be in strict subordination to civil power. What that really means is that if you're actually projecting force into an area, if it's not just self-defense, you're allowed to open carry and have a gun on you. But if you're actively looking to enforce any standard of public safety, public security, even going out to people holding a gun, offering medical, that's illegal. And this is further fleshed out in...
You are absolutely wrong. There is absolutely nothing correct about what you are saying. This has nothing to do with the military. It has nothing to do with any of that. And I've had to debunk this argument multiple times. I think part of the reason why nobody anti-Rittenhouse is trying to make videos like this is because, I hate to say it, there really is not a lot of good arguments to be made that make any sense. So they go in this direction of suggesting that he wasn't a security professional, which is what one of them did. Then they go in the direction of this, apparently. He's going to go on to make some arguments suggesting that Kyle was, like, impersonating a police officer or something. I'll get into that in a moment.
In the following statute, I'm going to bring this up. Sorry if I move the video around a bit. So, falsely assuming to act as a public officer or employee or a utility employee. So basically, what we just saw with the Constitution is Wisconsin reserves the right to project armed force into an area only to sworn officers of the law. Basically, you have to you play by the rules of the law, and the government gets to basically send you into duty, and that government is elected by the will of the people, right? It's ultimately the people who provide the armed force, not some private paramilitary organization that just decides it's a good idea.
So let's go ahead and read. I'll go ahead and make this bigger. What he's saying is that Kyle was impersonating a police officer, which was never, ever insinuated by anybody. He at no point ever stated to have any official authority to do anything. That's what this is supposed to be about. this is not an argument to be said that you have to be a police officer to do these things. So this is a terrible argument. This is actually worse than the suggestion that he wasn't a security professional somehow made it illegal. And I've actually, so like even just reading it here, whoever does any of the following is guilty of a Class 1 felony, assumes to act in an official capacity or to perform an official function, knowing that he or she is not the public officer or public employee or the employee of the utility that he or she assumes to be. This is literally about people who put on uniforms and pretend to be cops and are not. It has nothing to do with anybody, who is just exercising their rights. And as I've stated also on the Wisconsin State Legislature site, you don't need to be a security professional, you don't need to be a police officer, because everybody, first of all, has the right to self-defense and defense of others. And furthermore, everybody has the right to defense of property and protection against retail theft, not only of their own, but of a third person. I'll read this again. Defense of property and protection against retail theft. 1. A person is privileged to threaten or intentionally use force against another for the purpose of preventing or terminating what the person reasonably believes to be an unlawful interference with the person's property. Only such degree of force or threat thereof may intentionally be used as the actor reasonably believes is necessary to prevent or terminate the interference. It is not reasonable to intentionally use force intended or likely to cause death or great bodily harm for the sole purpose of defense of one's property. Now, in addition to that, a person is privileged to defend a third person's property from real or apparent unlawful interference by another under the same conditions and by the same means as those under by which the person is privileged to defend his or her own property. So, and it's important to note that the person, or rather persons, who got shot in this situation, it had nothing to do with Kyle at that moment trying to defend property. It had to do with Kyle at that moment trying to defend himself. The person attacked him. So this notion that he needs to be a cop is just ridiculous. And I think that one of the major things that I find silly when I debate with people about this topic is that they make these suggestions as if the prosecutor, I guess, just chose not to charge him with any of these things. And the funny thing is that one of the things this guy does in the comments is like, mock somebody for not reading the criminal complaint. Okay, well, here's the criminal complaint. And it just so happens that we have first-degree reckless homicide, first-degree recklessly endangering safety, attempt to first-degree intentional homicide, use of a dangerous weapon, first-degree recklessly endangering safety, use of a dangerous weapon, possession of a dangerous weapon by a person under 18. You'll note that the prosecutor did not charge him with impersonating a police officer, which is the felony that you're talking about. He didn't charge him with it because it doesn't apply. So even the prosecutor, who obviously is not in Kyle Rittenhouse's corner, didn't charge him with that because that's not what was going on. So read the criminal complaint that you were mocking people for supposedly not reading. There's a reason he wasn't charged with this, because he didn't do it. And not even the prosecutor believes that.
So when we look at this statute, which is a felony. I'll look at 946-69. Whoever does any of the following is guilty of a Class 1 felony. Assumes to act in an official capacity or perform an official function, knowing that he or she is not the public officer or public employee or employee of a utility. Basically, Kyle knows he's not a cop. He knows this.
And he doesn't have to be.
And frankly, he does it anyway. He goes out, he's looking for trouble, he's going to yank people out of harm's way. If anyone stops him, well, that's why.
Okay, statement of he's looking for trouble. Objection, Your Honor. Speculative. There's no evidence of that. Literally. The only people that he interacted with were people that he offered medical help to. He didn't even take any aggressive action against the kid who pepper sprayed him in the face.
Why he's got his gun to protect himself, right? He is electively looking for trouble and electively...
There we go with that. No, he wasn't. Prove that.
Patrolling with armed force with the proclaimed intent to use lethal force if anyone gets in his way. I mean, he literally tapes his own confession with the help of a daily caller report.
But that's not what he said at all. He didn't say, I'm going out here and I'm going to shoot anybody who gets in my way. This is a total mischaracterization of what went on in your quote-unquote confession tape. I've played that clip and played it again and again, and I guess I'll have to do it one more time. So, fortunately enough, I have that here. It's just going to make part of my video a little later, but here we go. Why was Kyle there?
Yeah. What are you doing out here? Obviously, you're armed, and you're in front of this business we saw burning last night, so what's up?
So this is actually McGinnis, who's one of the witnesses later, interviewing Kyle Rittenhouse. And it basically speaks a lot to what Kyle's motives were for being there, and also just the setup that the militia had.
People are getting injured, and our job is to protect this business, and part of my job is to also help people. If there's somebody hurt, I'm running into harm's way. That's why I have my rifle, because I need to protect myself, obviously. But I also have my med kit.
There's some other people who are armed as well.
Their job is to protect me.
Gotcha. And then what about these guys up on the roof?
Their job is to provide overwatch to protect me also.
Gotcha.
They're protecting everybody on the run, protecting each other.
Understood. And
We're running medical, and we're going in, and we're getting people.
And what about, are you from the area?
I am from the area.
What brought you out here tonight? You just wanted to provide medical attention?
Provide medical attention to people that need it. If somebody's injured, like, you get hurt, I'm grabbing you.
Have you encountered any issues yet thus far with law enforcement or anything like that?
So again, he wasn't there telling people, I'm going to shoot anybody who gets in my way. That is a gross mischaracterization of what he said.
And then actually number 2, exercises any function of public office knowing that he or she is not qualified so to act. Yeah, that he should know this. You know, he hasn't been hired to do this. And frankly, he makes just so many mistakes a deputy wouldn't make. You know, he's carrying his weapon in a menacing carry. You know, of course a bipolar person's going to flinch at that.
He's carrying his weapon in a menacing carry? There is literally at no point he's menacing anybody. I dare you to go find a video clip of that. Because the only people who ever got his gun pointed at them were people who aggressively moved on him, including the first person he shot and every shot that he fired subsequently. And when a person basically surrendered, put their hands up and moved away from him, he let the guy go, turned around, and went straight to the police.
He's not wearing a uniform. He has no oral communication. He doesn't know how to own a crime scene.
Because that's not what he's doing. And you don't need a uniform to defend yourself or defend the property of others.
Basically, Kyle screws this up in pretty much every way you possibly could, and it shows. He's doing one of the toughest jobs on the planet with no training. You know, don't get me wrong, I highly respect the police. I'm, you know, generally speaking, I owe a debt of gratitude to more than a couple of officers that I might name in a later video. My point being, their work is really hard, and it is a really, really dumb, stupid idea to try to do it without a day's worth of training.
So here's the situation that people are presented with that I notice that people, particularly on the left of this argument, and I say this again as somebody on the left who has to deal with this crap all the time, is that the impossible situation that people are being presented with is this. The police have been ordered to stand down and allow the riots to happen, not by choice, and certainly not by any legal right on the part of the rioters to destroy property. I've shown videos earlier of what happened to, for example, the guy at the car source dealership is literally ruined because his business was destroyed and his insurance doesn't cover domestic terrorism. So the police have been ordered not to do this job, and at least to the best of their ability, they're trying to contain riots as much as possible, but that's it. So the private citizen will then, at that point, have no choice but to enact their rights to defend their own property, which they are entitled to do, according to Wisconsin law. You don't have to, like, just say, okay, well, I guess, you know, it's illegal to defend your own property, which then in turn makes it legal to destroy someone else's property. That's how the situation plays out. If you're suggesting that only the police or officials have a position to be able to stand in defense of property, then it's simply legal to walk into your house right now, set it on fire, and there is nothing you can do about it. And if the police have been ordered to stand down, questionably, by local politicians who don't want to deal with the angry mob that'll show up at their door if they don't bend to their will, which is why this whole thing is domestic terrorism in the first place, then you're just apparently supposed to just let them burn your stuff. That's not how the law works. So people do have the right to defend their property. They do have the right to defend the property of others. Period. And they don't need a special license to do so.
So basically, what this establishes is that Kyle's actions were he's committing a felony, and as a result, just
No, he's not committing a felony.
even commissioning a felony generally is acknowledgement of acting recklessly. So let's now go to the reckless homicide statute, and this is the first statute he's been charged with. It's very important to note this is not intentional.
I want to take a moment to reiterate something that I've said multiple times when I deal with this specific fallacious argument, is that if the suggestion is that you lose your right to defend yourself because you're currently in the act of doing something illegal, then it would literally be legal to simply shoot rioters because they have no right to self-defense because they're doing something illegal. There's a reason why the law doesn't work that way.
So whoever recklessly causes the death of another human being under circumstances which show utter disregard for human life is guilty of a Class B felony. There's a couple points in the dicta that's actually very important here. I actually say, I shouldn't say stigma, I should say precedent, actually. But let's go here. Is a utter disregard for human life is an objective standard of what a reasonable person in the defendant's position is presumed to have known and is proved through the examination of the acts that caused the death and totality, examination of the acts that caused death and the totality and circumstances surrounding the event. So it's not about the specific moment where he pulls the trigger. It's circumstances in totality. He should know that he shouldn't be an officer under these circumstances. He's completely untrained.
He's not trying to be an officer.
And the fact that he's on video saying, well, I got my gun, that this is my cheat code for any trouble I might find. Yeah, I mean, that's utter disregard for human life.
And that's absolutely not what he said. At all.
It really shows all evening. When Rosenbaum is dying on the ground, he has 24 seconds to call 911, and he calls his buddy to catch up instead. He doesn't.
Adrenaline dump when you're under attack. He calls somebody he trusts, and then his first stop is to head straight to the police. He initially came back around and stood there over the man and did not leave the situation until the person who you identify as a hero later in the video, the journalist, said, "Get the hell out of here." And the reason he told him to get the hell out of here was because the mob was assembling and said things like, "Get that motherfucker." So rather than be in a situation where he would end up having to shoot other people inevitably, he left and headed straight for the police, who were only a couple blocks away.
The Daily Caller reporter is a hero. Like, he literally took the shirt off his back and ran over. He didn't care if he was going to get killed. In that moment, that guy's a hero. I love him. But Kyle acted with perfect selfishness right after shooting. So it just kind of shows the utter disregard for human life. So a lot of people are talking about, well, Rosenbaum charged him, the self-defense. Well, that's important where this comes in. This is State versus Bella, 2001. An actor causes death if his or her conduct is a substantial factor in bringing about that result. That would be the underlying felony.
He hasn't committed any felonies.
Substantial factor need not be the sole cause of death for one to be held legally culpable. Whether an intervening act was negligent, intentional, or legally wrongful is irrelevant. The state must still prove beyond reasonable doubt that the defendant's acts were a substantial part in producing the death. Well, they were a substantial part. I mean, not only did the underlying felony probably produce the panic and actually did produce the situation where Rosenbaum was shot, he actually also pulled the trigger. Rosenbaum getting freaked out and charging him, which probably wasn't legal, at least not strictly speaking. That's the intervening.
Probably wasn't legal, not strictly speaking. So just so we're clear on something, assaulting a minor is always illegal. threatening a minor's life, which I revealed in a different part of my video, is also, I mean, threatening anybody's life is illegal, which he did. Earlier in the evening, Rosenbaum told Kyle Rittenhouse and his associate Ryan Balch that if he caught them alone, he would kill them. So, with that said, there was somebody actually charged with reckless activity, and thankfully, in part due to my video, this man, Joshua Zeminski, is the actual person who is the reason why all of this went on. He is the first person to fire a firearm in the situation, and he's the person actually who did behave recklessly in the way that inevitably caused the firearm to be used. An hour-long analysis of different videos from Evening by Neil Kiernan, a Michigan-based blogger. Woohoo, that's me! Posted September 26, properly identified Zeminski and breaks down his presence near the gas station where Rittenhouse first fires his AR-15 rifle, killing Rosenbaum. Okay, so, and he admitted to doing this, and he got arrested for it, and then is out on a $1,000 bond. If you watch my documentary, I go in detail about what this guy is, and he has a rap sheet that's really long, which is why he was going around by an alias named Alex Blaine. So let me go ahead and take a moment and play the video part of my documentary that details exactly what happened. So now I'm going to use two different clips of people analyzing that first shot again, and some of this is again redundant, but the reason I'm showing it again is because the importance of Alex Blaine, alias Josh Zeminski's role in this situation has been understated, and that is he fired the first shot. He's the one who irresponsibly used a firearm that led to everything else, the chain reaction of events that moved on afterwards. He's the one who escalated it to that point, and I'll let the two people who analyze this kind of take it further.
Yeah, that's Antifa, man. Oh, he got a gun, baby. Oh, he shot him.
Now I'm going to slow it down to point out a very curious thing. Notice how everyone in this frame runs after hearing the first gunshot. But both of these people, a tall man and a shorter figure walking together, have a casual, nonchalant gait.
Alex Blaine, Ashley Kruger.
Even after the next blast of gunfire, they continue to saunter as normal. This reveals that the gunshot in the air was not a spontaneous thing, but a strategic behavior of some kind. The chaos that erupts after fails to disturb them. It's that first gunshot that begins to take this encounter into fatal proportions. Fleeing from his assailant, Rittenhouse hears this close-range gunshot and knows he can't run away from a bullet.
This, by the way, is from that police report that you were mocking people for allegedly not reading.
His back to the shot, he's thinking they're shooting at him, and even though we know they aren't, we also know that there are nefarious motives afoot.
So, if you're talking about somebody who's involved with reckless behavior that led to people being killed, it would be this man. So, take that into account when you analyze this situation, and I would implore you that you didn't even make this video that long ago, and I don't know how you were not aware of this, because this is a critical aspect of what took place. He fired his weapon, which is what led to Kyle turning around.
That's their intervening act that this legal statute allows to happen. Basically, Kyle's reckless disregard for safety by acting as a armed peacekeeper without the training or permission of the civilian government means that, that's the reckless underpinning of this.
So if he does those things, it's legal to beat him up or try to kill him. No, again, that's not how the law works. There were a lot of people committing felonies that night who didn't get shot, nor would it have been legal to just shoot them. They don't just suddenly lose their rights to self-defense because they're in the act of committing a felony or a misdemeanor, as is the case, possibly. They're still arguing the issue of whether or not Kyle Rittenhouse was legally carrying his weapon or not. If he wasn't, it was a misdemeanor, not a felony. But regardless, this is just totally fallacious logic. It makes no sense.
And Rosenbaum reacting to that, he's not really held culpable to that. Now,
Okay, so you're suggesting that Rosenbaum was reacting to Kyle illegally impersonating a police officer, which is what makes Rosenbaum no longer culpable for attacking him. You really think that Rosenbaum's motive was to just be a really good citizen and save everybody from the kid walking down the street minding his own business with a fire extinguisher and a rifle in his hand? That's your assessment?
of course, after Rosenbaum is shot, there's a good question as to whether Kyle is still operating as a peacekeeper at that point. I think he could just be a scared guy. He's like, I just killed a guy, I have no idea what to do. But at this point, he has created a panic. He's created another reckless situation besides the underlying felony. He doesn't call 911. He doesn't try to aid Rosenbaum in any way. He's showing utter disregard for his human life, and he's still holding his gun. He even calls someone on the phone. Oh, I think I shot someone. And he runs off still holding his gun, ready to kill people. So,
Ready to kill people? He was ready to run to the police. That's what he was doing.
at this point, he has established himself as an active threat to the community. He doesn't have a uniform on. He's just some weird kid with rubber gloves and, a gun running around.
What the hell does his rubber gloves have to do with anything? So you wear rubber gloves, so that makes it legal to attack you? Look at that guy running along with rubber gloves. He's obviously inciting a riot. Did you see that? He was wearing rubber gloves. Come on, man. Okay, a threat to the community that is actively running towards the police. That's what he was doing. He didn't shoot anyone else until they initiated aggression on him.
And under the circumstances, panicked people are allowed legally to act like panicked people. They're allowed to try to stop this active threat to their community. And that
Panicked people are allowed to act like panicked people? Please show me the statute for the rights and privileges of panicked people. Okay, now, that's ridiculous on its face, but let me get back to the legal point, which I've had to answer in other videos, in rebuttal of my documentary. And one of them is that even if you think that you are initiating a citizen's arrest, the people around you don't have the person you're trying to arrest does not lose their right to self-defense, as was explained by a lawyer who is legally licensed to practice in the state of Wisconsin.
that's what you see in a lot of the video, right? These aren't necessarily the straight-laced people you might think, you hope to see. They're not cops, but these are people desperate to save their community and save their loved ones. Huber is trying to save his girlfriend.
Huber's trying to save his girlfriend? From what? From a kid running away trying to get to the police? Did Kyle Rittenhouse ever point his gun at Huber's girlfriend? You got video of that? No, you don't, because it didn't happen.
The video shows one thing. It's authentic. Everyone is scared of this kid. Everyone is angry at this kid, and they want to keep him from killing anyone else.
Then why did they attack him when he was fleeing the situation? He wasn't attacking anyone else. That's actually something I brought up in these comments. I said it brings to mind one of my favorite memes. Kyle Rittenhouse, the only mass shooter to run away from his victims.
And Kyle, being uniquely privileged to set the record straight, doesn't really even try. He gives Gage a non-denial. And then
Whoa now. Hold on a second. Okay, one of the things I said in my comments that were a little more humorous was I said, I guess you're right. Kyle should have basically held a Q&A where he sat there and allowed the angry mob to ask any questions that they might have had after they said, "Get that motherfucker," and started rushing at him. I'm really starting to wonder how much video about this situation you've actually watched, but that's fine because I happen to have one, a very long one, where I detail this that has been used by Lynn Wood, who is Kyle's defense attorney, and there is video of the brief conversation Kyle had with Gage Grosskreutz. Here, I added later also, this is Gage Grosskreuz's live stream that was apparently running. For those of you who don't know who that is, Gage is the guy who eventually has a pistol in his hand that he points at Kyle, and he's also the guy that Kyle shot his bicep off. But anyway, so one of the really important part about this video is that Gage is going to run up on Kyle and be like, "What are you doing?" And Kyle literally says, "I'm going to the police."
Hey, what are you doing? You shot somebody?
I want to get police.
Who shot? Who shot?
Stop him!
Hey, stop him!
He said he was going to the police. He didn't just give him a non-denial. He said he was going to the police, which is a fact that you, for whatever reason, didn't include in your video. You also didn't include in any of your arguments in the comments. You just simply skipped past that part. You say you just gave him a non-denial.
When all the cards are down, he doesn't even use words, he just starts shooting.
That is a point-blank lie. When all the cards are down, he doesn't use words, he just starts shooting. So we leave out the fact that every single person that he shot at attacked him first. All of them. Every single one of them. He did use words. To the one guy who actually bothered to walk up to him and ask him what he was doing, he said, "I'm going to the police," and was heading straight at the police, who were about 2 blocks away. Then Gage took it upon himself to scream at the mob and tell them to initiate a very ill-thought-out citizen's arrest. If that's all they were going to do. I actually think the likelihood is, since considering the first 2 acts they took against Kyle was to hit him in the back of the head with their fist, and then hit him in the back of the head with a skateboard, and then hit him in the side of the head with a skateboard, these people weren't there to just subdue him. Many of them probably would have just stomped him out. Now, there's speculation to that, but regardless, even if that was their intention, was just to subdue him, in this interesting culture that we live in now where people are critical of police, I wonder how many people would be okay with the police apprehending a suspect by striking him in the back of the head, and then striking him in the back of the head with an object, and then striking him in the back of the side of the head with an object, and then trying to stomp him in the head, and then pointing a gun at him, feigning surrender, and then pointing a gun at him again. The last one is something that could theoretically happen, with the exception of feigning surrender on the part of a police officer. The rest of it would all be something that we would, if it took place, we would be having more riots about, because it would have been considered police brutality.
So that's utter disregard for human life. Someone even said, "Oh, he shot someone." So Kyle knows why they're there. He could try to explain this, but instead he just starts shooting. That's probably why these are intentional charges.
That is, again, a point-blank lie. That's not what happened. He didn't just start shooting. You're literally characterizing it as if he just fired into the crowd.
Probably reckless homicide charges right underneath it. For some reason, intentionality was a question. But arguably, he knows why they were there. He knows he set the whole thing up, and he pulls the trigger anyway.
He set the whole thing up by doing what? Walking around giving people first aid and medical attention? Walking with a fire extinguisher? You have to remember what it is these people are upset about, which is that the group that Kyle was part of put out a dumpster fire. That's literally what started all of this. And the reason why Rosenbaum was so pissed was because somebody put out the dumpster fire. His dumpster fire. It's ridiculous. That's what they were angry about. That's why they were in any way being aggressive towards the militia group or libertarian group or whatever we're calling them today, was because they prevented arson. That's what the protesters were upset about. That's why Rosenbaum attacked Kyle. That's why he threatened to kill him if he caught him by himself.
So that's intentional. I mean, intentional homicide, I didn't really go into. That is up here. First, intentional homicide. Whoever causes the death of another human being with intent to kill that person. If I were a defense lawyer, I'm not a lawyer. Understand, I'm not a lawyer throughout all this.
Well, that's clear.
But I think it's, whether you're a lawyer or not, if you ever go into the field with a gun, it's good to know what the laws are, right? It's just common sense. Like, cops understand what the laws are. They're not lawyers. They just know they shouldn't manslaughter people. But if I were his defense lawyer, I might argue that after the first shooting, he regressed into a perfect state of childlike selfishness. He didn't know what he was doing. He got cornered and just out of...
He regressed into a state of childlike selfishness. You keep using this word. How selfish of him not wanting to be stomped out or murdered by the angry mob.
pure instinct, he started shooting, and this really should be reckless homicide, not intent.
He didn't just start shooting. He literally fires only at people who aggressed on him, and then when the final individual who had approached him initially aggressively put his hands up and backed away, he let him go, turned around, and went back to going to the police. He even tried to spare Gage, who initially feigned as though he were surrendering, and then pointed his gun at Kyle again anyway. And only then did he shoot him.
Intentional homicide, because he didn't know he was killing someone. He's just sort of panicked. Unfortunately,
that's not what happened.
That's not the defense strategy.
Yeah, that's not the defense strategy, because that isn't what happened at all.
Defense lawyers are basically saying, oh, nothing to see here, self-defense, he did nothing wrong. And they're middle fingering the Wisconsin justice system, which in my opinion is a really, really, really bad legal strategy. As a matter of fact, I would actually say Kyle's whole presence there is the middle finger to Wisconsin. I mean, he basically wheels in from another state, decides he can enforce the law better than the cops or deputies can, with zero training. And
I've already been over the reason why the cops aren't doing anything at the moment. When you say it's a middle finger to Wisconsin, what kind of middle finger is it to just go out and actively burn down businesses, destroy property, and riot in Wisconsin? Who are they putting a middle finger up to? Now, again, I'm against police brutality, but burning down and destroying the property or stealing from people who had nothing to do with an illegal or questionable police shooting is not right. That's a middle finger.
Gets people killed. And
he didn't get anybody killed. They all attacked him. They got them killed.
I'd argue that's actually an invasion of Wisconsin's sovereignty, frankly. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of conservatives, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, these were unsavory types. They deserve to die. I'm not going to agree or disagree with that. I actually think Cooper was a hero. I'm not going to go into Rosenbaum, he's an imperfect individual. But that's not the point. Those individuals...
Anthony Huber was present for the argument at the dumpster fire. Anthony Huber was one of the people who got up in the faces of the people who put out the dumpster fire. Anthony Huber has a long list of offenses, including domestic violence, choking, strangulation, false imprisonment, etc., etc., etc. He got involved in the situation because he was a thug. He was shown himself to be a thug earlier on in the evening. He wasn't trying to protect anybody, and he certainly wasn't trying to save his girlfriend by walking up on a guy, running away towards the police, hitting him in the back of the head with a skateboard, and then doing it again.
Are Wisconsin's responsibility to address through the deputies, the police, and the whole legal system that does not acknowledge a death penalty, not for some out-of-town kid to come in whose only tool is lethal force.
If they're not doing that, what are citizens supposed to do? Well, I guess it's a good thing that the Wisconsin legislature has decided that people are allowed to defend their property or defend the property of third persons.
Prosecutors aren't prosecuting Kyle because of Huber or Rosenbaum or Gage. They're prosecuting him because because what he did is against the interests of the state of Wisconsin, and they're going to spank this kid hard because.
What he did was against the interests of the state of Wisconsin. How? What did he do that harmed Wisconsin? What is Wisconsin doing to protect the business owners, including the one at CarSource who is utterly ruined after $2 million worth of damage done to his property?
So, as I said in my last video, if you want to do this with your life, join the deputies, join the police force. Or if you want to do some sort of neighborhood watch, do it in conjunction with law enforcement and know everything you possibly can about defense, whether it be hand-to-hand, whether it be de-escalation, whether it be nunchuck. I don't care. Before you even have to think about using a gun, know what you're doing and make it your absolute last resort. Because
one of the funny things that you keep bringing up here, this is another interesting point. The police interacted with the militia group multiple times through the course of the evening, enough, in fact, for people to try to conspiracy theorize that they were in on this in some way. But If these people were doing something illegal by being there with their weapons and acting in the way that they were, the police are even at one point shown giving them water. If there was something illegal about what they were doing, something would have been addressed. But it wasn't. If what they were doing was illegal, and somehow Kyle was, as you put it, and well, rather incorrectly tried to put, was that he was impersonating a police officer or acting in a official capacity, then that's what he would have been charged with. But he wasn't, because he didn't.
Firing a gun generally is always a headache. That's all. I appreciate you listening, and I hope this legal background has helped a little bit. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I just happen to know a little bit about gun laws, and
I would go back to study about this considerably, particularly if you're going to actively go out of your way to try to besmirch the reputation of somebody. You might want to know what you're talking about. I invite you to watch my video. I invite you to, in fact, I'll even bring you on my podcast if you'd like to discuss this issue in a civil fashion. But now that I've finished the video, let me get to some of the comments. So, basically in multiple times I went ahead and just repeated the entire statutes that are actually relevant. And there are a lot of times that he's arguing here in bad faith, but, as I pointed out, he doesn't have to be an official anything. This is another person making the "you're not an official person" argument that I debunked a long time ago. Wisconsin law permits people to defend themselves, their property, and other people and their property. Period. In this argument here, he's going back and forth with somebody, and somebody else brings up some of the other statutes. And eventually, I go ahead and quote those statutes back to him, and he says, no, Kyle wasn't acting as a cop, but he sure as hell was doing what a deputy would do, armed keeping of the peace. And at the time Kyle went up to protesters, he was on public ground, and as such, all property defense privileges you cited as moot. Okay, but that doesn't suddenly mean he's not allowed to protect himself. Then you say, you clearly have limited legal background. You clearly have little background. There are typically two classes of sworn officer. Irrelevant. Kyle wasn't fighting crime. Irrelevant. But he sure as hell was conducting an armed peacekeeping patrol. Okay, and as I've already demonstrated, people are allowed to defend their property and the property of third persons, and they're allowed to defend themselves. Everyone forgets that deputies exist. Sigh. And Kyle doing their job without training for the role was a felony. No, it wasn't. Recklessly criminal? You can make a discussion as to whether or not there was something reckless about it. That doesn't in any way suddenly eliminate his right to defend himself. It seeded the first shooting. No, what seeded the first shooting was Joshua Zeminski firing a bullet into the air after Joseph Rosenbaum aggressively moved on Kyle. That's what seeded the first shooting. Which is why the charge is reckless homicide. There is no self-defense. Defense allowed as part of the statute. Again, you can't just murder somebody because they're committing a misdemeanor or even a felony at that point. The person still has the right to defend themselves. Then you say there's a reason why landlords can't self-evict tenants, even once they have won a court case, because lay people can't electively introduce held armed force into situations for non-self-defense purposes. Wrong. As I demonstrated earlier. Then he says, I pointed out, because he says Gage gave a non-denial at best, at worst, planned to attack the police next. And I go, LOL, what? He flat out told him he was going to get the police and was going straight to the police. Then he said Kyle recklessly shot someone when a cop or deputy would never have needed to. And then I said, yeah, someone who threatened to kill him earlier in the evening, who aggressively moved at him, causing Kyle to flee. Kyle didn't turn to fire until another firearm was shot, which gave him a reasonable belief his life was in danger. 2. Wore nothing to identify himself as a good guy. He looks like a social reject with a backwards ball cap. And then I go, LOL, there is no legal requirement to have a uniform on to defend yourself. 3. Didn't call 911 for Rosenbaum despite having time and opportunity. And then I said, yeah, he went straight to the police instead, who were a few blocks away. Then you put 4, didn't render aid to Rosenbaum in any way. And then I point out he also initially didn't run away. He stayed and then was told by McGinnis to get out of there when the mob started forming to go after him and say, get that motherfucker. 5. Never explains his shots to anyone. And this is where I said, yeah, I guess he should have stopped and held a Q&A with the mob that started forming with the words, "Get that motherfucker," who no doubt would have forced him to shoot more people. 6, tells new ears indirectly through his phone conversation that I just shot someone. And I said, so what should he have done instead? And then 7, trots off with his gun out, ready to kill, wearing weird blue gloves, no uniform, to the sounds of people screaming about a shooter. And I again address this. Ready to kill? LOL. Again, he didn't shoot anyone else who didn't attack him first, and literally spared everyone who didn't attack him. Wearing weird blue gloves? What the fuck? Who cares? Look, a guy wearing weird blue gloves. Let's get him. He was clearly inciting the mob with those gloves. He doesn't need a uniform. He doesn't control the people making sounds of that there's a shooter. And then you left out trots off to police. And then you put in here blew his last chance that Gage provided him with, a non-denial, and at worst a plan to attack the police. And I go, LOL, his last chance? He told Gage point blank he was headed for the police, which you leave out of all of your comments and your video. Then he blocks me saying, you're misbehaving on this page, and I am now deleting your comments and banning you. He hasn't deleted my comments yet. Maybe he's trying to read them first. So then I go, and this is in response to something else he said. In a panic that Kyle caused. I said, correction. In the panic that Joseph Rosenbaum and Joshua Zeminski caused. He said, in a panic that Kyle caused, they have perfect legal privilege to go for the disarm. Kyle still has the legal right to defend himself. They initiated their go for the disarm by hitting him in the back of the head twice while he was running for the police, then tried to stomp him in the head, then hit him in the head again, then approached him with a firearm, feigning surrender, only to point their fire at him again, and when Kyle hesitated. And then he says, and Kyle, having created that panic, has no legal standing to shoot them. Actually, your legal right to defend yourself does not vanish just because you are committing a crime. The only crime with any leg to stand on in this conversation is the misdemeanor of carrying a rifle as a 17-year-old, which does not make it legal to stomp you to death. The anti-Kyle people who make this argument fail to consider that by their logic, then it's legal to simply shoot rioters, as they have no right to self-defense while committing crime. The kid should have stayed on the damn car lot. I said, and Rosenbaum should not have attacked him, Joshua Zeminski should not have recklessly fired a shot in the air when the initial confrontation ensued, and then people involved later should have let him go to the police exactly as he said he was doing. And he says, and another one bites the dust, people need to understand this is a curated conversation, and if they misbehave, they get booted. Analysis of statute applicability are welcomed, misconstruing basic facts or not. Okay, but you point-blank lied multiple times, and then just simply made up things about what was going on, particularly about what you believe Kyle's motives were. So, basically, so far he hasn't deleted these comments, but there were other things that he said here that, it's just there's so much of it on here that is just on its face totally wrong. Period. Like, as in there's just no truth to it. And that is pretty much the common problem that we have. If you said you're not a lawyer, and then you say I have no legal background, okay, then why don't you explain why he wasn't charged with impersonating a police officer? I'd love to hear it. You don't think the prosecutor, the actual lawyer, might have some thoughts about that? It's because he didn't do it. He didn't impersonate a police officer. He utilized his rights under Wisconsin law to defend the property of others, and then, when he was attacked, to defend himself. All he has is, the actor reasonably believes is necessary. As soon as somebody else fired a firearm, which is what took place, he had every reason to believe it was necessary to fire his firearm to protect himself. It's that simple. It doesn't even have to be correct. He has to reasonably believe it. And he had every reason to believe it. That group of people initiated that confrontation. It's funny that everybody who's anti-Kyle in this argument, all of their arguments seem to start chronologically after people have attacked Kyle. Then he's the cause of the situation. Or you make this ridiculous, fallacious argument that he, by virtue of being there, caused the situation. This is the reason why several people have made the equivalency argument that this is like telling a woman she shouldn't have been in that neighborhood wearing those clothes when they got attacked. It makes no sense. You're trying to take all of the responsibility away from the people who actually initiated this encounter. So let's take a look, if I can find it quickly, at what transpired during the second shootings. First guy shot, tried to stomp him in the head. Next guy shot, Huber with the skateboard from earlier. There's one shot fired off here. This guy here actually has a gun in his hand. He's about to get his arm blown off. Right there. Now I included this picture because there's been a lot of argument about whether or not Gage points his gun at Kyle. And I actually also took a clip here from the recent video that the Rittenhouse legal team put out about this, because when Gage walks up on him and Kyle has his gun drawn at him first, Gage puts his hands up, feigning as if he's going to surrender or just not, engage. And then as soon as Kyle lets his guard down, Gage moves at him again and points his gun at him.
Third protester fakes as if he's surrendering, then suddenly advances with a handgun aimed at Rittenhouse. A single shot strikes the man's right bicep.
So this is the picture that the media was using to indicate, that here you have Gage's hand up in kind of like a posture of, okay, I'm not going to shoot you. Kyle's looking at him, and he hasn't decided to shoot him yet. Hasn't raised his rifle yet. And then Gage, after doing that, chooses to engage him further, and that's when Kyle shoots at him. Now, listen again, because you're going to hear a bunch more gunshots that aren't accounted for. And you can see this guy over here. If Kyle really just wanted to shoot people, he could have shot this guy. The guy backed off, put his hands up. Kyle noticed he wasn't a threat and just started making his way towards the police. So now let me see if I can find it, because I didn't articulate this better because I found out about it later. But let's look at what initiated the second shootings altogether. Going back to what led to him falling down immediately after his conversation with Gage is, you will see, if you look very closely, Huber hits him in the back of the head with the skateboard, actually after another guy had already punched Kyle in the head. So Kyle gets hit in the head, and he's still just trying to leave, heading straight towards the police, which are right over there. Now that's Huber right here. He's got his skateboard in hand. He's about to hit him in the back of the head with it, which is actually what leads to Kyle falling over. You see him swing it at him, and he's hit him with it so hard that he literally drops his skateboard. So then he runs over here to retrieve it. And then the whole sequence begins, with this guy trying to stomp him, Huber hitting him in the head again, everything that I've already shown. Every single person that Kyle Rittenhouse fired at initiated aggression with him first. Period. He doesn't need a license. He doesn't need to be a cop. None of that is true. None of it. And when you say you're going to ban me from your channel for saying that I'm misrepresenting the facts, and then you make up things like he was ready to kill, or he was looking for trouble, that's all horseshit. That's literally just fiction. You have no evidence of that. There is zero evidence of that. And I say that, again, as somebody who researched this hour-long documentary, initially believing, oh, look at this, we got another crazy shooter. That's what I believed going into my investigation. And then I did the thorough investigation and found out I was wrong. So are you. Thanks for viewing, folks.